Ghost in the Shell has finally just come out. I've just seen it, and before you watch it, this is all you need to know about Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell is a very popular series, and it is a very ancient one. It's actually very old. It all started in 1989 with a manga written by Masamune Shiro. This manga was so popular they made a movie about it in 1995. The movie was a great success, and they made another movie after that one called Ghost in the Shell Innocence. Following the success of the movies, they started a series, and then after the series they made a movie about the series, and then there was another series that came out called Arise, and then in the end of the Arise, they made another movie called Ghost in the Shell the movie, which was the last one until this one. That's too complex. So how do I say this? So after the success of the first movie, they made another movie, Ghost in the Shell Innocence, and they started a series, and then after the series there was another movie, and then another series, and then another movie, and now this one's out. That's it. That's simple. The movie that just came out, it's actually a whole new concept in the series. It's not like a replica of any of the previous movies. It's more of a cinema adaptation. It's more an adaptation for the cinema. You see what I did there? I changed it. Sounds more cool. Sounds cooler. Colder. Even though this new movie is not based upon any specific movie, it picks up several different things from the series, from the movies. So without doing any spoilers, I'm gonna try to sum it up for you, the various things that this movie picks up from the previous movies and series. So the whole series of Ghost in the Shell, they revolve around the story of Major Motoko Kusagani. Now, not much is known about her past. There's a few hints here and there, but this movie is all gonna be about her, as most of the series were also about. Of course, we also have Batu, her loyal companion, who everybody that is familiar with the series also knows. There is their partner called Togusa, and then there's also this team of experts that they have, Ishikawa, Saito, Paz, and etc., all these guys. There is also an important character who is actually the boss of them. That's Aramaki. And Aramaki is like the boss of the whole department series. And then there is another character that you probably need to know, that you've probably seen already on the trailers, which is called Kuze. Kuze is actually a character named Hideo Kuze that also appears in the series, not in the movies, but he's a bit unrelated to the main characters of the whole series. Now, going on to this movie, you have to understand a little bit of the context where they come from. And of course, I'm not going to tell you the whole history behind it, because I would be here for 5 years telling you stuff. But I can tell you this movie starts after a World War III. Now, World War III was based upon nuclear weapons. The whole world started to nuclear bomb each other, but what happened was that Japan actually hid from this war. He didn't fight upon this war, just hid and protected himself and let the other countries and nations blow themselves up. And what happened was that America rised up to the top, and he was the only superpower that actually survived. And what happened was that Japan was also alive, so the only two main powers in the movies are Japan and America. And what happened was that America and Japan actually made a deal for peace. So they coexist peacefully. Sometimes there is conflicts here and there, but there is a peace around them. Alright? Now, another concept that you should be familiar with is that they started exploring cyber technology in a very advanced level. So people have cyber enhancements to either the brain, to either the eyes, to the body. There is a lot of cyber enhancements, and the movie itself revolves a lot around that. So there is a couple of concepts that you should be familiar with going into this series and starting to watch it for the first time that I'm going to try to explain to you. One of the first main concepts that you should be familiar with is called the ghost. On the series, the ghost is like your main core of decisions, it's like your values, it's like a mixture between your brain and your spirit. That's sort of what they call the ghost. Starting on the first movie in 1995, the concept was that the ghost was only on humans. However, later on the movie, they discovered that the ghost may also be present on cyborgs as well. You should also be familiar with Section 9, which is the group of, so to speak, good guys around the movie, where the Major is part of. They are actually led by Aramaki, they have Batu, and then there is also cyber companies. In the original movies and in the original series, there are two main companies that actually make cyber bodies and cyber enhancements. One of them is called Megatech and the other one is called Locus Solus. Of course, it is implied that there might be other companies as well, but they don't just talk about them that much on the series. Then there is these cyborgs that were made from Locus Solus, one of the main cyber companies, called the Genoids. They always look like they are very traditional Japanese women. Now the Genoids are mostly used for being slaves and then maybe for some other perverted stuff, but that's only implied in the movies. Also, I want to tell you that sometimes in the actual original movies you see the cyborgs talking to each other without moving their lips. Now, they do this through the brains, they don't explain it very well, but it's possible that sometimes they don't need to move their lips to talk. Now, we should know a little bit about some of the movies, and I'm going to explain you some of the most important things on the movies that you should be knowing. In the first movie, Ghost in the Shell in 1995, the whole movie revolves around Project 2501. So, Project 2501 is an artificial intelligence created by a secret organization that was trying to hack into governments. So they made this big artificial intelligence and they were trying to use it to hack onto specific targets to actually manipulate the system and take their own advantages from it. Now, what happened is that they made the Project 2501 so smart that it created a conscience of its own, it created a self-awareness, and it became something more than just an artificial intelligence, developed into something a little bit human. Project 2501, or this artificial intelligence, it ran away from them, it sort of went into the system and started following its own purposes. Now what happens is that the first movie revolves around Section 9, was actually trying to find the Project 2501 because he's been hacking into people's brains. They know him at that point as the Puppet Master. A lot of the movie goes by and eventually they catch the Puppet Master and they actually start investigating onto him and they see that he has a ghost of his own and they become really scared because the first time they actually see a ghost on a cyber organism. Now at this point the Major is also very self-aware of herself. She has a cyber body, she has a brain, so she has kind of a ghost, and she is really confused with the whole concept of who am I, what is a ghost, what is a brain, what is the mind, and when this guy comes along, this Puppet Master comes along, she actually becomes a lot interested in him. Now what happens is this private group that actually created the Project 2501, they actually go into Section 9 to try to retrieve the body, to try to retrieve the actual Puppet Master, but as they actually awake him, he starts explaining that he's no longer just an artificial intelligence, that he's become more than that, that he's self-aware, and he becomes even, and he even starts questioning what is a human, what makes you a human, is it your memories, your DNA? So it's kind of a whole interesting concept of what makes me human, what is a soul after all. And this private organization, they actually grab him back, they grab again the Puppet Master and they run away. The Major goes after them and eventually comes up that they are pinned down in a factory and the Major has to go alone in there to actually take them out and to grab hold of the Project 2501 again. Now as she arrives in the factory, there is this guy controlling a tank over there, which is kind of a spider tank, looks a lot like Metal Gear from Metal Gear Solid, and there is a whole fighting scene between the Major and his tank, and it's an amazing fighting scene. I advise everyone to go and see it. The actual fight ends up with Batu coming in and shooting down the tank with a special gun that he has, and he actually kills the tank with a gun, but not before she actually rips her own arms trying to pull out the armor of the tank. It's one of the most gruesome scenes in Ghost in the Shell. Everyone that knows the series knows that scene where she just tries to grab hold of that armor tank, and it's a very interesting scene. Now, as I said before, Batu comes in, he shoots down the tank, and it ends up with the Major in the ground, and also the Project 2501 who was there in the ground close to her, and the Major actually tries to dive into the mind of the puppet master to actually understand what's going on and what's this guy. As she dives into his mind, he actually takes control of her, and he starts explaining his purposes onto them. And his main purpose is this: he's actually become self-aware of himself, he's controlling a whole vast network of systems, and he doesn't have the capability of one very important thing for him, which is to reproduce. He can actually make copies of himself, but he cannot make a son, he cannot make a new generation coming out of him. That's the main reason why he came to Section 9, to actually find the Major, who is a cyber body of herself and who has a cyber brain, who has a ghost of her own, who's a very complex being herself, and he wants to actually merge with her so that both of them can both have a son. It wouldn't be like us humans, but it's like a merge of their own brains to actually make a whole new brain, to make a whole new mindset, so to speak. Now, eventually that private company has a sniper team ready on a helicopter that shoot the guy in the end, and we still don't know if the Major has accepted the Project 2501's ideas to actually merge with her or not. We just know that there is a sniper shot and the Project 2501 dies, and we don't know what happens to the Major. Now, the Project 2501 gets shot in the head. We don't know what happens exactly to the Major, but we know that her head is actually rescued by Batu. She wakes up later on, and Batu has actually placed her head on a body that he got from the black market, which is the body of little children. And as she wakes up, she's no longer the Major. She's merged together with the Project 2501, and they are now a new entity, and the movie kind of ends like that. Now, the second movie is not as important as the first movie to actually be familiar with the plot. But there is a couple of references to it, so I should tell you a little bit of the second movie. Now, the second movie follows around the story of Batu a little bit more than the Major, even though the Major still makes a couple of appearances. The main character here is gonna be Batu. We actually get to see Batu going into a secret apartment that he has, where he actually has a dog, and no one would expect for him to have a dog because he's such a badass, but then he has this puppy who's always happy and always happy to be around him as well. It's kind of a funny scene. The main plot revolves around a company called the Locus Solus. They make these cyborgs called the Gynoids, which are mostly female bodies, and they are sold as slaves to their masters. Most of the companies that actually get them use them for slavery. There are also some perverted stuff going on. Now, the movie starts off with a Gynoid that's actually lost control. They're following a couple of cases where some Gynoids have lost control, but in the beginning there is this one freaky Gynoid that's lost control, and Batu is actually going after her. And so in the very beginning we see Batu going after her. She's killed a few cops. Batu actually pins her down in an alley, and when he goes over there he has a fight with her, and then just when he's about to kill her, there is this freaky scene where she turns to him and she says, "Help me, help me." Then her whole mouth opens up and she's a cyborg and she blows up, and it's a very horrific scene. It's a very freaky scene. Now, that's how the movie starts out. The whole story is not very important for you to know. You can see it later. It's a great storyline. Now, as the story goes by, they eventually find out there was a little children that was controlling the Gynoids, and she was actually sending a stress signal so that she would be rescued, but she killed a bunch of cops to do it, and that's not right. So they actually have a fight in the end. It sort of ends up with a whole conflict of whether or not she was violating the ghost of the own cyborg that she was controlling to make her do things that she didn't want, or if she was right on doing so because she's a human and she is trapped and wants help. So that's the whole conflict of the second movie. As you might have seen through the trailers, there is this character that's called Kuze. Doesn't appear on the first movie, doesn't appear in the second one. Is actually part of the second season of the series and is actually part of a terrorist group called the Individual 11. Now that terrorist group has actually got a noble purpose. They want to help the refugees. They want to help a group of guys that's being exploited and explored. Now the interesting thing is that throughout the series we actually get to learn a little bit of the past of the Major Motoko Kusagani. There is this scene where the Major walks into a store that is an antique store. Now when the Major is actually going through the store, she sees this actual figurine that resembles her a lot, and then the lady on the antique store, she starts to explain the story behind the model that's there on the store, and she starts explaining some of the actual ideas behind the background of the Major. And she was actually on a plane crash, and guess who was there with her? Hideo Kuze. Hideo Kuze was actually a friend of her that was actually on the plane with her. Not much is known before that, but we know there was a plane crash. She went into a coma. He became sort of paralyzed, and what happened was that everyone else died on that plane. It's quite a touching story. You should watch it before going into the movie. A lot of people are saying that the movie is based upon that. Not entirely true, but either way you should watch it. And the last series I want to talk to you about, which is not really the most important one, is the series Arise. Now, the series Arise started in 2015, and they are actually a series that tries to go back a little bit. Now, it goes 2 years before the incidents with Section 9 and the Puppet Master and all that, and it sort of tries to give a new angle to the story of the life of the Major before she was actually part of Section 9. But in the beginning, she's actually working for a different corporation other than Section 9. But in that first episode, she figures out that they just really want her body. They're not really worried if she's okay or not. They just want her as a weapon, not really caring whether or not she's fine. So by the end of the first episode, she actually figures out they implanted fake memories onto her mind, and nothing that she thought was real was real. But then she becomes upset with them, and so she parts away from that group, and that's actually when she meets Saramaki, who's actually making a proposal to her to come to work to public security, which later on becomes Section 9. Anyways, the rest of the series is cool. Actually, none of them is actually featured on the movie, but they're pretty cool to watch as well if you have some spare time. That's pretty much everything that you should know about Ghost in the Shell before going on watching it. Now, one thing that I wanted to say is that if you haven't seen the previous movies and series, you're not going to understand some of the focuses that they do on the movies, because they actually try to grab some of the most intense and most awesome parts of the movies and of the series, and they try to put it on the action movie. So if you're a fan, if you actually like Ghost in the Shell a lot, you're gonna love it. If you're not a fan, if you've never seen Ghost in the Shell before, it's still going to be an awesome movie, awesome new concepts, awesome acting as well. It's a really good movie to watch. So I hope you like this video. This has been my very first video for my channel. So if you do a like and you subscribe, it's going to be a major motivation for me to keep on doing this. But if you don't, we're still friends. Anyways, thank you all for your time. Enjoy the movie and peace out.